So I have been homeschooling middle schoolers for the past 4 years, and I have had three middle schoolers for the past 2 years of our homeschooling journey. So today I thought I would share some tips on how to homeschool middle schoolers. Now, some of these tips will apply to anyone who's homeschooling, and these tips may also apply to high schoolers, but I really wanted to hone in on things that I have learned from homeschooling middle schoolers and just focus my video on that today. If you're new here, my name is Davine, and this year we are going into our 5th year of homeschooling. In the upcoming school year, I will have a 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grader. And on this channel, I like to share our curriculum picks, reviews of different curriculum, how I plan and schedule our curriculum, our days, our weeks, our schedule, things like that. So if you're interested in things like that, don't forget to give me a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And let's get into I have 9 tips on homeschooling middle schoolers.
Today's video is a collaboration hosted by myself and Shauna from Homegrown Homeschool. I will have a playlist in the description box below that will link to a bunch of other moms' YouTube videos talking about tips for homeschooling. So if you want more tips on homeschooling, be sure to check out that playlist below when you're done watching this video.
Now, if you see me looking down, I did take notes for this video because it is one of those that I had to definitely think about and organize my thoughts in the most logical way. So I apologize if you see me looking down at my notes. I also apologize if you hear birds in the background. My door is open because it is hot. It is hot over here. So if you hear the birds, that is why. So in planning your homeschool year with middle schoolers, my number one tip is to know your children. Now, obviously, you need to know your children to homeschool them. But what I mean by that is be aware of how independent they are able to be and how much help that they are going to need throughout the school year. Don't think that just because they're in the next grade, they're suddenly going to be all independent. Learning independence is a process that you start early on, even in elementary school, and slowly build on towards high school. Now, even my high schoolers aren't completely independent. I do still like to do a few subjects with them. I do need to check in with them pretty regularly to make sure they're on track. So depending on the child, they will need differing amounts of independence and support during the middle school years. Now, my kids have a range of between special needs and very independent. And so each child is different. And so when I'm looking at each school year, I'm thinking about each particular child and how much they're going to need me and how much they're going to be able to do on their own. My number 2 tip is don't assume that they can just be completely independent. I think that a nice mix of student-led independent work and teacher-led is nice for most students. Now, you know your child best. You might have a child who's just raring to go and wants to do everything on their own. I would recommend that even if they are at that point, that maybe you still do 1 or 2 things with them just as a check-in each day. I don't feel like middle school is a time to be just like letting your kids go off and do their own thing entirely. Now, of course, your family dynamics and your family situation, how many younger kids you are dealing with, how many older kids, if you are trying to work, of course, all of that will affect the amount of student-led versus teacher-led things that you can do. But if you are able to, I do think that having some teacher-led time during the middle school years is really positive, and you can keep working on your relationship with your middle schooler, keep that connection strong. My third tip is that middle school is a really good time for your child to be experimenting and learning and doing things that they are interested in, as well as honing in on those skills that you feel like they are still weak on as you're trying to prepare for high school. So don't just focus on one or the other. Don't just focus on like only their interests or only the things that they need to work on that you're trying to prepare them for high school. Focus on both. Try to have a nice range of things. Try to have a variety. Have some things that your child is interested in, and then you are purposely choosing just because they're interested in it. And think about the things that maybe they haven't had exposure to yet. Maybe you need to expose them to certain science topics or social studies or certain language arts or math things that they need to solidify during these years. The middle school years is really a great time for just reviewing the things that they learned in elementary school, taking it to that next level so that they are going to be ready for high school when that time comes. My fourth tip is to start the school year familiar with the curriculum that you did pick for your child. Don't start the school year and be fumbling around and wondering how you're going to use certain curriculum. Spend some time in the summer if you can to look over the curriculum, to visualize what you think a lesson will look like. Think about how those lessons will work for your child. Adjust the lessons as necessary. Of course, you will be adjusting throughout the year, but it's really great to go into the school year familiar with the curriculum, familiar with the way that the curriculum company recommends you use it, and then aware of the adaptations or the things that you're going to change with that curriculum in the upcoming school year. Try to keep your child in mind when you're looking at the curriculum. Don't decide that you're just going to do a lesson a day or a lesson every other day. You do need to think about your child and how that's going to work with them and make your best guess. So you can start your school year trying to customize the curriculum as best as you can to fit your child. My fifth tip is to already have a schedule planned out in advance. Now, this doesn't have to be like a very, very firm schedule. I do recommend you probably have a start time. As the students are working towards their high school years, the workload tends to get a little bit heavier. And so middle school is a time where if you have been kind of not as structured in your homeschool, middle school might be a good time to start having a little bit of structure so that your child is ready for the independence that they may or may not get when they get to high school. Now, I am saying set up a realistic schedule, start at a realistic time for your family. It is nice if your kids sort of know when school is expected to start and sort of the flow of the day. You don't always have to exactly say, we're going to do this first, this next, this next. It depends on your child. In our family, we typically have a few different blocks. So we'll have our first hour block where my kids are generally doing independent work or working with me on math. And then we go into a group work block where I'm either working with all of my kids or I'm just working with my two middle school boys. And then we go into some more free independent work block before lunch. And then after lunch, it's sort of finish up what you haven't finished up. So I don't exactly have like scheduled out hours, like you do this, you do that, you do that. But most days follows a very predictable pattern. We do start school at a very predictable time. I'm not changing the time that we start school every single day, things like that. We just sort of know what time we start on which days and sort of know the flow of the day. And that is something that I set up at the beginning of the school year and we start practicing it. Now, even from year to year, our schedule doesn't change a whole lot. It does change because I do think about each school year. I do think about the curriculum that we have. I do think about how much time I'm going to need to work with specifically my middle schoolers, when they're going to be able to work on their own. And I do try to make sure that I can visualize each day before we start the school year when I'm planning that schedule. All of that leads into my sixth tip, which is be flexible but firm. So what I mean by that is when you're going into each week, and if you know that the week is going to have some additional challenges, maybe you have some appointments in there, maybe your child signed up for sports and that's going to be taking up a lot of their time for the next month or two. Think about your schedule, think about your child's workload ahead of time, and make adjustments before the frustration kicks in, before they are overwhelmed and cannot handle it. For example, one of my middle school boys did sports at various points throughout the year. In going into those sports, I may or may not have adjusted his schedule before the sports started, but soon into starting the sports, I did look at his independent work and I did cut back a little bit on a few different things as he was doing his sports, just to make sure that he is able to complete his schoolwork that was required and be able to participate in the sports that we found beneficial to him. When he stopped sports, then we went back to our normal workload, and that's just sort of what is expected. Now, if I'm looking into a week and I'm feeling like we are getting run down, we need a bit of a break, maybe we need a Friday off, I will tell the kids ahead of time. I don't tell them the night before, oh, we're not going to do school the next day. They know ahead of time that this is going to be a 4-day week. We are taking Friday off, and I have adjusted their workload accordingly. And so I try to anticipate the problems. I try to anticipate the sticking points. I try to anticipate what is going to happen this week and how might that affect our ability to complete what we normally would complete. Now, what this does is it allows my kids to know that I am not wishy-washy. I am not going to be like, oh, we don't have to do this today, or oh, I don't think we need to do school tomorrow. We are tired, we're busy. I don't want them to think that I'm just going to drop school at the drop of a hat. I want them to know that the expectations are laid out at the beginning of the week, and that is what we're going to do. So along with this, I make sure I communicate any schedule changes. I communicate if I've already decided that we are going to cut back on certain areas. So it doesn't mean that I'm not flexible. It doesn't mean that we don't change our schedule based on life. In general, most of our life can be anticipated. Now, some of you might be in some different circumstances. Some of you, like I said, you have toddlers, you have babies, emergency situations come up. And I think that kids can understand emergency situations. As long as you are not constantly changing your plans without letting them know ahead of time, without communicating ahead of time what you're going to change and why you're going to change it, the kids won't get in the habit of thinking that if they complain enough, then they get out of stuff. So that is mainly what I'm talking about. Of course, things come up, and sometimes you have to just drop the day or drop the next day because it's an emergency situation. It's something you didn't know about. But I try to keep those to a minimum, and I try to communicate clearly with my kids about the upcoming week and what they can expect, so that they're not thinking that I'm drastically changing our plans all the time. The next tip is more specifically for middle schoolers and really preteens and all of that. Be firm, but also have compassion. Now, that's a hard balance to strike. There will be bad days. There will be bad days. I think starting in the preteen years, there's going to be attitude. There's going to be some kids are just going to be really stubborn. Some kids are going to dig in their heels. And being firm and being compassionate doesn't mean that we're just giving in. It does mean that we are evaluating what we are doing with each child as we are doing it. We're not changing our plans really fast. We're not throwing curriculum away just because we had one bad day. But we are taking the circumstances and what is happening in our home into account and making small, reasonable tweaks as we go along. So if you're finding that your student is really struggling with a certain subject or a certain curriculum, obviously you do need to slowly try to adjust it so that your child can learn best. But don't make any sudden drastic changes, because every day is going to be a little bit different with kids who are going through that period of life. Along with that, I have to say, in order for you to have the compassion that you need for your children as they are going through this, you also need to be taking care of yourself. You need to be prioritizing your rest. You need to be prioritizing your your sanity when you're trying to homeschool middle schoolers. So do try to find times and ways to get the right amount of sleep that you need to do. If you are struggling with hormonal issues, and I am speaking that from experience, I would say a few years ago, I started going through perimenopause, and that is something that not a lot of people talk about, but it was causing a lot of emotional disruption in our home, in myself. It was also causing me to have other symptoms like hyperthyroid issues and things like that. I was very, very stressed. I was sick. I was emotional. And I was not doing a great job of having compassion on my kids when I was in that situation. So I did get help. I went and saw a naturopath, and we slowly worked on all the things that needed to be worked on. It took some time. It took some time to get myself back together again, but it has significantly changed the way that I react to my children and how our homeschool days go. I'm not saying my children have changed. It has been me who has changed, and it is me who has been able to deal with the emotions and the turmoil that happens when you have kids at this age range. So take care of yourself. If you're finding it to be very difficult to keep yourself composed and you feel like you're being irrational in the way that you're reacting, I do say seek some help, because if you are at a certain age of life, there are things that happen, and really you're not going to be able to help yourself if you do not get some help. So I recommend you do that, and that is part of being firm and having compassion. So now when my kids are going through the major emotions and things like that, at least I can be calm and I don't have to join in with the craziness that is happening. And that definitely helps. So within that, I do want to say, hold firm to your expectations. Of course, you can be wrong, and sometimes you can say, I was wrong, I don't think we should do this, but try to make that a rare occurrence, because you are thinking ahead of time on what your expectations are, and you are communicating that clearly with your kids, and you are adjusting those expectations slowly over time as it is necessary. The next tip is to be consistent, but also be willing to try new things and to tweak things. So, what I mean by that is, once you have thought out a plan and you have made your plan, try it for a while. Just because it's not going smoothly at first doesn't mean it's going to be a total disaster. Try it for a while and make slow, deliberate changes. So, don't go and change everything unless you really feel like that is necessary. Don't go and change everything. Focus on the sticking points, focus on the things that are the hardest, and make slow adjustments there. It may not be that your whole schedule is wrong. It may not be that your whole routine is wrong. It may just be that maybe you need to space your subjects a little bit differently. Maybe you need to start with independent work and then move into group work, or maybe you need to start with group work and then move into independent work. Make some small adjustments along the way, but don't just give up entirely. Be consistent with your expectations. Be consistent with when you want to start school, what you are expecting from your children in different subjects, while still being flexible and making changes when they are needed. Some things that you may need to try are maybe a reward system, because just because they're middle schoolers doesn't mean they don't like rewards. What rewards you give will be very based on your children. Some things might be, like I said, alternating subjects. Maybe there's certain subjects that they like and subjects that they don't. So maybe you space those out. So you have a subject they don't like. They know that it's followed by something that they like, and then it's followed by a subject they don't like, and you kind of alternate. Maybe they need breaks. Maybe they need to be able to go jump on the trampoline after a certain amount of time. Experiment with things like that along the way as you are consistently doing your daily school and your daily routine. Try little things like that as you are making your tweaks to your school day, into your school routine. Along with that, I do want to mention that as you are homeschooling your kids, your family dynamics are going to be changing. Your children are all growing. They are all changing. They're all changing at the same time and in different ways. So as you are consistently doing school, you will need to make adjustments. You will need to make tweaks to your schedule. I'm just saying, don't go crazy and be super dramatic. Try to think about your sticking points and change those things slowly over time. My last tip is, don't be overly worried about high school. As far as high school goes, yes, it is a big deal. Yes, depending on what your child wants to do in the future, they do need to do certain things in high school, depending on what state you're in, depending on where they want to go to college, if they want to go to college, if they want to go to trade school, whatever they want to do in the future. Yes, high school is important. However, ninth grade is just something you do after eighth grade. It is not a huge dramatic change. Sixth grade is not a huge dramatic change from fifth grade. You are challenging your children each year that they are in school. So in sixth grade, you're just upping a little bit from fifth grade. And in seventh grade, you're upping a little bit from sixth grade. And eighth grade is the same. You are just slowly adding to what your children are doing, slowly and incrementally. Now, your child will be where they are at when they get to ninth grade. Some children will actually be ready for ninth grade material and curriculum by eighth grade. If you have that child, you will know that when they are going into eighth grade. You will know that that child is ready for ninth grade curriculum because they will have already done eighth grade level work and they'll be ready to move into the next level. So I have a child like that. I also have children who, when they hit ninth grade, we are still working on fifth, sixth grade work. And that is where they're at. There's no amount of pushing and shoving and cramming that I could do to make my child who's going into ninth grade be ready for quote unquote ninth grade curriculum. That is just not where my child will be in ninth grade. And so we just continue on. We enter ninth grade and we are doing an adapted version of ninth grade. We are doing language arts at their level. We are doing science at their level. We are doing history at their level. Now, my current ninth grader who's going into 10th grade is one of those students, and she has actually been attending a hybrid public school. Public school is the exact same thing. If she is in ninth grade and she's not able to do ninth grade work, then she has adaptations and they just adapt the work to her. They also know that you cannot force a child who is in ninth grade to do ninth grade work if that is not where they're at. So don't worry about ninth grade other than obviously you are challenging your children at where they are at throughout elementary school, throughout middle school, and they will be where they are in ninth grade. And when you hit ninth grade, you will know what to do with your children. You will know how to adapt and what they need. Maybe you'll be picking ninth grade curriculum and you will be adapting it to make it doable for them. Maybe you'll be picking middle school or elementary curriculum for them. But that is what they are going to need when they're in ninth grade, and they get their credit for their ninth grade year based on whatever topic or subject they are studying. So I just wanted to say that. I hope that makes sense. Some people are very, very worried about high school, and they're worried about their children doing high school, and they're worried about where their child will be when they're at high school. And that's great because you are homeschooling. You should be concerned about your child. You should be concerned about their education and what they're going to be doing in high school. But it is really not as big of a jump, and I don't think it should be a big jump from middle school. It is just the next thing. It's the next step. It's the next grade. Ninth grade is going to be different from what they're doing in 11th and 12th grade because your child is continuing to learn and grow throughout high school. They're not going to be doing the same caliber of work in ninth grade as they will be in 12th grade. And that is just how children develop. So I wanted to add that in. I know that some of the worry is about keeping transcripts and grades and all that, and it is an added thing that many homeschool parents do choose to do in high school. So there is a little bit of that. There is a little difference in high school. But as far as worrying about if they're going to be able to do the work when they get there, your worrying is not going to change your child. Your consistent effort over time is going to set your child up in the best possible way that they can be once they hit ninth grade. So I hope these tips were helpful for those of you who are going into teaching middle school or are teaching middle school. These are just some experiences and things that I have learned while teaching middle schoolers. And let me know in the comments below if you have any tips that I have missed, anything that you have learned from teaching middle schoolers. I know some of you have taught middle schoolers even longer than me. So share any tips that you have in the comments below. I'd love to have a conversation, and I'd love for people who are finding this video to be able to get even more information and preparation for teaching the middle school years.
If you're looking for more tips and tricks on how to homeschool, don't forget to check out the playlist below in the description box to see what all the other homeschool moms give as tips on how to homeschool.
So thanks so much for coming today, and I hope to see you all in a future video. Bye, everyone.